Hello, everyone. It's Steve with Aptera Owners Club. Just today, Where We Go Next, which is a podcast, released an interview with Steve Fambro, and it's a hour and 5 minute long interview. It's very interesting. If you're an Aptera fan, it's probably an hour that's worth your time. I listened to the whole thing, and I just wanted to give you like three excerpts that I thought was the most interesting part of the interview for me. So this first part is Steve giving us his take on what happened in the first iteration of the Aptera.
Well, what happened was, yes, our board encouraged us to bring in what they called professional management from automotive. And somewhat in their defense, again, new segment, new product, new industry. All of us were wondering, how do we go and raise big money, without having someone with automotive experience, at least on the management team? And of course, this being my first startup and Chris's second startup, and the amount of money that we were looking to raise, I suppose maybe we didn't, as founders, exude a lot of confidence with the early board that we could do this. And I think we had a lot of self doubt as well. I think we were on board with getting a professional CEO who had automotive experience. And it was pitched to us as sort of like, the Eric Schmidt coming in to work with Larry and Sergey. And that was what was pitched to us. And that's what were expecting. But we were completely unprepared for the sort of Machiavellian evolution of the power structure and dynamics. And I've since come to learn this is sort of the standard fare, with at the time companies like Chrysler or other automotive companies. It's a very cutthroat, stab your way to the top, climb the ladder however you can kind of business. It isn't how Chris and I work or deal with things, but I suppose it is a reality, of the world. That's just how the world is. And so I'd say from the beginning, the relationship just didn't work well. We later found out they were not very complimentary, or not even, I was supposed, trying to help us or support us, with the board. They were maybe professional team, had some plans all along. But it became clear we just couldn't work together. There wasn't mutual trust. There wasn't respect. And most importantly, they were unable to raise money. So Chris and I had raised all the money at that point. So after a year of this, Chris and I decided that they had to go, and we made our case. We built consensus with the board, but when it came down to the board vote and the fight, if you will, we were outvoted by one, and so we left the company and parted our ways. So
Okay, so that's very interesting. We knew that that probably wasn't a good relationship, and up until now, Chris Anthony and Steve Fambro have been kind of a little more vague about what happened. And we knew that they probably got pushed out of the company, but it turns out that what had happened was they didn't trust the new Steve Ambrose, Chris Anthony, did not like the way that the new management was running the company and tried to take control of their company back from them. And the board sided with the Paul Wilbur and the team that was brought in from Detroit, and eventually um, they lost control of the company that way, and they decided to leave. And I think this probably informs the way that they're dealing with Aptera now. They really don't want to lose control of the company, and I think they're very careful to structure any investment plans so that they retain control of the company, because I think they've been burned by this first experience. And that probably ties into the way that their fundraising raising is going now, and the way they approach their relationship with investors and people like that, because they just and their board and stuff. They want to retain control of the company this time, because I think they feel that they could have made it successful the first time, and they were somewhat robbed of that ability. Okay, so the next part of this video that I thought was interesting was talking about possible price hikes. He doesn't come out and say it, but the way I interpret this is, well, take a listen for yourself.
But that can't explain all the cost differences. So, how are you able to make the vehicle so cost efficient, especially at this rather boutique manufacturer stage where you don't really get the benefits of scale?
those costs are what those prices are what we advertise starting in 2019. Obviously, everyone is following the supply chain issues globally. Prices have gone up on virtually every commodity, chip, etc. So invariably, we'll have to revisit that as we get closer to production. And if it needs changing, change it. I'm not saying we will or we won't, but I'm saying, yes, we're all very mindful of those costs and how the global market has changed. One of the
Okay, so I took that to mean that they are pretty likely to increase the prices on the Aptera. He's saying that those prices were set in 2019. There has been significant inflation of commodity prices and just across the board in the world economy, and they will revisit it when they start production. That's what he said. And when you revisit it, it's pretty obvious the conclusion that you'll come to, that things have gotten more expensive. Now, perhaps a bunch of their moves they've made, one of the things they mentioned is that they didn't expect to get this much interest. Initially, they thought that maybe they would sell a few thousand vehicles, but now they're, in the tens of thousands of vehicles. So they are having to scale much higher. And like their most newly announced partnership with CPC Group, with the stamped CFSMC, that is a part that is very expensive to tool up at the beginning, but then as you scale, it pays for itself because the costs are at the beginning. And then once you get the thing set up, you can stamp out pieces fairly inexpensively. Whereas the honeycomb composite structure they had, it's the setup cost is relatively cheap, but then because it's labor intensive, each each round of making a shell is a little bit more expensive than pressing it out. So with economies of scale, they're going to get cheaper with the stamped part that they're getting now. So maybe they've made some moves, and because of they're getting some economies of scale, and it's going to be cheaper. But I take this to mean, and of course, this is just my speculation completely, but I take this to mean that they are going to increase the prices of the Aptera. That's just my guess. I'm hoping what they do, and this seems like the most reasonable thing to do, is that for those people that have already pre-ordered, I would think that it would be a good PR move for them to honor the price that they have, at least for the initial run. And then announce pricing changes for the people that are ordering after they go into production. That part seems rather likely, but anyways, that part, the way that I interpret it is that they are most likely going to increase prices. I don't know. Tell me what you guys think about that. Okay, this last part is asking about what the hardest part is and what they're most excited about in 2023.
What's one of the more difficult things you're anticipating with production, and what's something that you're just really excited about with the company heading into the new year?
The most difficult thing, it's that last little bit of design work. We're at like 99% lockdown of design, and it's that last 0.1% that feels like it's just taking an inordinate amount of time. And it's just the way it is. There's nothing that can be done about it. And so, seeing where we can spend money and add people to speed things up, or things that can't be speeded up, that's the most frustrating. Things that are just going to take a certain amount of time, even if you had a truckload of money to shovel into it. Those are the frustrating things. Usually those are things that are outside of our control, done by outside parties or agencies. The second part of your question, the most exciting thing about 2023, I think it's just that, is you're going to see all this come together and seeing a real tooled Delta production vehicle come off the assembly line next year. And every facet, every single part made by a tool, precise, fits like it should for a factory produced vehicle. And then they're just going to start coming off the line. And seeing that first one, I think, is just going to be incredible, because it literally will have been our modern lifetimes and two separate attempts, spent to get to that part. And once we see it, I think then it'll be a massive, not a sigh of relief, but just a sense of completion, kind of turning the page of that chapter, and now just focus squarely on increasing production, different variants, looking at different parts of the world. It'll be just a whole new way of looking at the company.
All right. So the first thing you notice is, back then, first they said that they would deliver a vehicle to a customer by the end of 2022. Then it got changed to that a production intent vehicle will be made, which is meant to be the Delta by the end of the year. Now it seems like they're coming to the realization that the Delta vehicle will not be made until next year, 2023. And I've always suspected that that's the case. I think that the timelines for all startups is very aggressive, and it's most likely to keep investor interest. Anyone who's ever done any project knows that things never go on schedule, things never go as planned, and there's always unexpected things that set you back. And the thing to do probably would be to like take whatever you think it's going to take and double that time frame, I would think. But I think if people do that, because this is the way all startups work, if you give realistic timeframes or conservative timeframes, you just can't generate the interest and you can't find investors to give you money. So I think in order to attract investors and money, people have to be kind of optimistic about their time frame. So they've been optimistic, and I think we all understand that. And it looks like Delta is not coming out until next year. And I suspect they're going to have to test Delta and do validation of Delta. And my guess is that first customer deliveries aren't happening until at the earliest middle of 2023. I hope I'm wrong, but that seems kind of like the trajectory we're headed. And then he was talking about that one of the hardest things is getting that last 1% of the design work done, which makes sense to me. You know, if you've ever built a house or done any project like that, you know, the framing and the exterior and the roof and most of the drywall, all that stuff goes in pretty fast. And then it's just that last part of putting like the trim in and the like little handles on the cabinets and stuff. That stuff takes forever. And what should you think should take a small amount of time takes forever. So I think that's where they're at. So it's good to hear that they're like basically almost done with the Delta design, and I suspect Delta design is going to be finished by the end of this year, and then they're going to make a Delta physically beginning of next year, 2023, and then they're going to validate the thing, and then the first customer delivery is going to be, this is my guess, probably middle of 2023. All right, tell me what you guys think about the interview. If you've listened to the whole interview, tell me what other things you noticed in the interview. I thought it was a very fascinating interview. Steve Fambro talks about what the co-management style is between him and Chris Anthony, how they're co-CEOs, and then his philosophy of management. It was all very interesting. I think it's definitely worth a listen. I'll put a link to the entire interview in the description below. Thanks for watching, everyone, and have a great day.